Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first September Community Hangout in our series of Hangouts to introduce you guys to Ushahidi version 3. My name is Angela Odwor Lungati. I'm the Director of Community Engagement at Ushahidi. And with me today we have Jess, Michelle, and Robbie. I'll have them all talk about what exactly they're going to be doing. Michelle is going to be helping us curate questions on Hipchat and on the Google Plus page. Yeah, Jess.
Yeah, so my name is Jess Shoreland, and I am product manager on the core platform for the new version of Ushahidi. We just launched the Ushahidi code base open source just a couple weeks ago, and we're gearing up for a launch of the new Ushahidi platform on October 1st.
Yay! Welcome, Jess.
Hey.
Robbie.
Hey, I'm Robbie. I'm the lead developer / for some time lead everything, but lead developer on Ushahidi v3, and I've been kind of along for the entire ride of building the product out, so it's pretty exciting to finally got to launching the open source version. Yeah.
Awesome sauce. Thanks, guys. So, why are we even having hangouts at this time of evening or morning or whatever it is that we are? We launched the open source version of our platform back a few weeks ago, and we're trying to get people to understand what exactly the platform can do. So we're going to be hosting a series of online demos and online discussions just to get you a little familiar and also create an opportunity for us to get feedback and learn with each other. So this first hangout today is more about to give you a higher level introduction into what Ushahidi version 3 is, our thinking behind building it out, as well as show you what the differences are between this version and the new one. A few house rules here and there. We're going to have the first 20 to 25 minutes of a bit of an introduction from Jess and Robbie. We're then going to jump into a small demo before we start fielding questions from the audience. You can post your questions either via our Hipchat, IRC, or Gitter pages. Posting on any one of these will post on all of them simultaneously. Or alternatively, if you're watching from our Google Plus event page, you can post your questions on there, and Michelle will point them over to us, guys. All right, sound good? Without further ado, I think I'll hand it over to Robbie to give us a bit of an introduction into version 3. What is this version 3 we keep talking about, Robbie?
So version 3 is a complete rebuild from the ground up of the Ushahidi platform. So now, a couple of years ago, we took kind of a step back and went, what are we going to do for version 3? What are the major features you're going to do? And kind of after a little bit of work, realized that was a huge gap between a lot of what people needed and what version 2 was doing, and the use case had changed a lot. So version 3 was kind of a rebuild from the ground up, both to hit a different tech stack, a more modern tech stack, and to hit a kind of a better coverage of user needs, rather than something that was built literally for one use case of monitoring Kenyan elections, something that's kind of built to cater a bit more for everyone's use case. So, how much of that did I cover?
I think a sizable amount. All right then. So maybe I'll hand it over to Jess to give us a deeper dive into, what are some of these differences that we're seeing between the new version of the platform? What have we enhanced? What have we changed? That kind of stuff. Jess, rock on.
Sure, Sam. I'm just going to share my screen quickly. And just run through a quick slide deck on the major differences that you're going to see between version 2 and version 3. Okay. Are we good on screen share? Everyone can see it?
Good. Yep, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. So basically, the core purpose of the platform is to change the way information flows. We want to give people a voice, and what that means is kind of 4 key functions. We have data collection, so collecting meaningful data from the crowd using any device and any connection. Data sources still include SMS, email, web, Twitter, RSS feed integration. We've got situational awareness, so having the real-time pulse of a situation from an incoming feed of posts and notifications from people on the ground. We've got and this platform is much more of an action-oriented platform with features like workflows and alerts and notifications that I'll get into in just a little bit in a little more depth. And then also data visualization. So telling a story with your data, making that data meaningful. You've integrated, you've started collecting, but then what does that all mean? And so it's kind of the so what. So we want you to be able to make quick, decisive action and quick analysis. Okay, so just kind of digging in, the key differences you're going to see are an updated user interface and design, saved searches and collections, which are two of the most powerful tools on this version of the platform, much more robust data management and visualization tools, and an improved development stack, which I'll let Robbie dive into if he so wishes. So the user interface, I mean, this is going to be the most noticeable change between V2 and V3. You're going to see a much prettier, intuitive interface. So on V2, this is what you'd see if you were to log in for the first time or log in and see your post. This is kind of your home screen. But now when you log into V3, this is what you're going to see. You have a dynamic header, which can be customized. You have kind of that main action add post front and center, so people know exactly the call to action as soon as they get to the site. We've got sidebar filtering, saved searches, and collections. So all of your navigation, all of your settings, anything kind of that you want to start with, your flow, is all there inside navigation instead of going into back end. So it's all in the front end user interface. Your settings are all there as well, so you can manage your deployment directly within the user interface. The next thing you're going to see is save searches and collections. So this allows you to create, save, and share dynamic filters. You can really use the power filters to drill down on your data, and once you get a set of filters that kind of shows you exactly the data you want to see, you actually just are able to save that data. Oh man, sorry about that. There you go. You're actually able to just save that data, and it goes over into the left navigation under Save Searches. It's a retrievable, bookmarked view, so that will constantly update with your data. Collections are kind of a manual creation. So as you see posts that are interesting to you, groups of posts, you can add them to a collection and save those and then share those. So here you can add posts, individually to collections on the list screen. And data management and visualizations, this is where your workflows and your views are going to come in. So the workflows are really one of the features I'm most excited about in this version. We have steps. So essentially you're saying if an incoming post needs certain steps associated with that, you can set that up and build your workflow around your internal workflow that you already have. So if it needs translation, if it needs a request, if you need to respond to that, follow up with the customer, whatever it is, you can build that and customize it however you'd like. So yeah, adding step, you're just gonna, it's a very simple thing. As you create a post type, you add structure to that post type, and you create those workflows within there. So next you're gonna see your list view. This is what a V2 list view would look like. And now we've got this beautiful interface here. You can switch quickly between list, map. Sorry guys, I've got a phone going off behind me. Sorry about that, hang on.
Hanging on. And taking coffee.
Excellent. While we're just waiting for a second, I'll just jump in. One of the main differences as well, sort of flag between like V2 and V3, is that there's no, like, so V2 always had this separate admin, and all the admin user interface and the listing of reports in the admin and the listing of the reports in the front end were completely different views and completely different interfaces. And so V3 kind of did away with all of that. You know, one of the most common plugins, and pretty much the first thing we all installed every time we installed V2 was Admin Map, which was basically out of that need for, like, I've logged into a V2 deployment, I actually need all the stuff that I have on the front end on the back end. So V3 just kind of out of the box, the front end and the back end are the same. You know, so there's some settings views if you need to get into them, but your actual kind of how you view posts and manage posts is kind of merged in between the front end and back end. We just hide things depending on who you are and like who you're logged in as. All right, have we got Jess back? Shall I let you go?
Yeah, I'm back. I'm back. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, so like Robbie was saying, I mean, it's all kind of we've allowed you to manage all of this here in the screen. It changes based on who you are and what your permissions are. So you can search and filter posts, bulk actions, edit posts directly from the list view. You can navigate directly to each individual post as well from the list view. The bar chart view is really an improvement from V2. You've got kind of a sorry about that. You've got the ability to compare different variables. You can compare categories, types against each other in the form of bar charts and timelines. So you can either you know, by count or by overtime, and that's all with one click. And we've got more stuff coming in the visualization. We're working on activity views and really building out that visualization suite so that you can make better decisions faster. And the development stack, I will let Robbie talk about here.
Cool. I'll jump in for a sec. So the old V2 development stack is like, I mean, it's mostly just a reflection of the age at when it was built. So it was Kahana 2, and Kahana 2, kind of for context, hit its end of life and end of support, you know, in something like 2009, I think. Something a long time ago. So we've been kind of nursing along Kahana 2 for many years ourselves and doing support ourselves, despite it being end of life. Plus, it was just all kind of very much tied to a web interface, despite now having a need for mobile interfaces and other things. So V3 we're still using Kahana, although to be quite honest, we're trying to phase that out as well, because even Kahana 3 we found to be not great, but at the moment it's still running bits of our tech stack. And then we're slowly kind of moving that towards really standalone business logic, where all the important bits of the code and the important bits of logic about who can access something or what the data model of something is all kind of encapsulated in classes that don't rely on anything outside of Ushahidi. And then kind of the biggest shift really is that we split the API from the client. So now you have a PHP API versus an entire PHP app, and that powers a JavaScript UI. So the UI is built in AngularJS. It just does OAuth back to the JavaScript, to the PHP API, and all your data comes out of the API. And the nice bit of that is things like, you know, all our authentication and all kind of the access control is handled in one place in the API. You don't need to, you know, in V2, if anyone who's kind of watched for a while, we had a little bit of a spate of security issues at some point, and some of those were just the case of like, this code is spread all over the place, and it was really hard to track down things. Whereas now, like, you know, all that access control stuff is done in one place. You can just look at it and kind of read through and be like, okay, this, you know, as long as this has the right permissions for different roles in it, then I know I'm good. It's not like there's some other bit where we forgot to check. So all of that stuff is a lot less kind of repetition in the code. The API encapsulates all of that. It means that when you then build a mobile app or anything else on top of it as well, you get all those rules baked in, provided you're hitting the API. And then your client can kind of do whatever it wants about visualization on top of that, and you know, you can do all the cool stuff you'd like to build without having to kind of fight with the back end and figuring out how to get the data you want to get. it's just just hit the API, and it's quite pretty clear and simple. That said, documentation is still on the way. We'll get that there soon. All right.
Awesome sauce, guys. So, I think it would be good if we now jumped into, like an actual live demo of all this awesome stuff we've been talking about. Just walk us through how exactly it looks like on the live platform. Robbie?
All right.
Kick us off. There. All right.
Excellent. So this is a clean install I just did, which is all my clicking around in the first 2 minutes of the call. So this is what happens when you've set up your API, you set up your client, you haven't done anything yet, you just got a clean build. So you hit username and password, admin, log your way in, assuming I haven't broken anything, which is always a fun moment. Excellent. So, and you just get, a blank map. We haven't got any data. We haven't really got anything else in here. First thing you probably want to do is jump into settings. Give your site a name, my grey map or something, and then I think most of that's optional. You really just want to give it a title to start with. The rest is kind of, up to you. Depends what your map is. All right, that should give us a deployment title. And then beyond that, kind of the first things you probably want to do is jump into users, give whoever else is in your team some access. I'll just add myself again. And either make them an admin or just a member. Members basically get very similar access to if you're logged out. It's just that they also get the ability to edit their own posts, and they can track that. And then beyond that, you kind of got so to be able, like the engine of everything in Ushahidi v3 is your post type. So your post type is basically like the form, defining the form and the steps that people fill in when they create a post. So you're going to want to jump into like basic posts. The initial version of this has very little in it. You're just getting, one step with a simple location field in it. If you want to add other fields, you pick from any type. I'll just add an extra text field. And then save that. All right, and then so you can see the results of that. If you go hit add post type, and then create a basic post, you get, this is our location and our text field, and these title and description field that appears in everything. So it's post test. Let's see if I can find home. All right, somewhere around here. So if you click, you'll get the map when you're moving around the map, and then so the completion of a stage doesn't really make much difference when you've got just one stage, but this is kind of how you manage a workflow. If you've got multiple steps, you'll get, you mark different ones as complete, and you can require certain steps to complete before you publish a post. So I'm just going to publish that to everyone, save the post, and then drop back out to the list and have a look at what we've done. So that'll give you a list. And there we go. We've just got our single post. Really simple. Let's see if I can jump over to another deployment with a bit of data in it, because that would be way more useful. This may have slower loading times. All right, so this gives us a little bit more. You can kind of see, we've still got our list of posts, which mostly is probably still full of junk and things. You can see, so you've got save searches, and this is like, if you're familiar with V2, you know that your kind of default admin, you always had a list of like all posts, of approved posts, of posts awaiting approval, awaiting verification. Save searches are kind of how you replicate that in V3. So by default, you get like all posts, which will just show you anything that you can possibly see, anything that's visible to you. You get published posts, which is so just anything that's actually public people, although by the looks of it, someone's munched the search a little bit. That's a little bit hilarious. If I restore that to what it was originally. So this is the thing, right, is that you can change what the search looks like. You can change what's actually in it. But so that's what you get is just your published posts. Unstructured posts is anything that's kind of incoming. So if you've got SMS set up or Twitter messages, anytime a post comes in, it doesn't actually have a post type yet. Like it's just a message. We only have whatever came from Twitter, and so this is where you start here. We have post type none, right? That's the filter that's active. If you scroll through these, and one of these is something you want to turn into a post, you hit update, and then you get a chance to pick, what type of post is this? What category does it fit in? Say we do humanitarian, you've got the original message in here, and then you can build out and add other fields to it. You can go up and see, so see if I can actually search and find wherever this is. Yeah, so search and actually add that location. And then, again, you've kind of got like different stages, different bits. I'm just going to publish what we've got right now. And that's taken, something that was just a Twitter message and turned it into a post. Beyond that, you've got lists of my posts, which is anything that you've created, obviously. And then there's a bunch of, other posts, other searches that people have created as they needed. Similarly, collections is kind of like, this is sort of a manually put together group of posts. So at any point in any of these lists, you can click through and go add to collection, pick one of the collections, and that'll add it to it. So a collection is just like a manual collection of posts where you've added them one by one yourself. And that can be good for a lot of things. It could be your flagged queue. Like, so you create a collection of flagged posts for anything that you want to flag for later to come back and check. It could be posts that I need to send to John to get him to translate. Could be all sorts of things, right? And it's really just flexible for what you want to do. It could be your list of featured posts that you want to keep sending everyone to and put on your homepage, right? So it's really flexible, can do a lot of things. I always feel like as I'm demonstrating this interface, it's kind of deceptively simple. Like, there's not actually a lot of things to click through, but there's a huge amount you could do. And I think this is only going to get better as we see people, play around with it and try it out for their own use cases and work out the best way to use some of this stuff. All right. Back to you, Angela.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that awesome workflow or demo of how exactly V3 works in real life. We're actually pretty good on time, so I guess we'll open it up for questions. And I have a couple before I even jump into having everybody else ask us questions. First one is, okay, in a real life or a real deployment situation, how would you explain the difference between saved searches and collections? What's the main difference between those two?
So trying hard not to come at this from the tech side, but so the saved search is literally just that kind of, it's a set of filters that you keep looking at. So it's really good for things that you need to check back on regularly. You want to check that list of posts near you in your town, right? Someone wants to create a saved search of all the new posts near me, or all the incidents of violence or a particular category near them. And then soon we'll have notifications so you can subscribe to that, have them sent out to you. But also, just if you want to come back, like if you're administering a deployment, it's this is the queue of new posts that I want to come back to and check into every day. A collection is really like a way of just bookmarking or flagging posts as you go through. So it could be, I guess it really could be for anything, and I don't have great examples beyond like flagging them or kind of storing them for later, but it just means you can kind of have a bunch of buckets that you're dropping things into as you go.
Yeah, I like to think of it
and
as
anywhere
like,
you are.
sorry.
Okay.
I like to think of it as like a curated almost like your own curated map of posts you find interesting, posts relevant to one thing or another. But yeah, it's kind of a manual curation of that.
Sorry, I was trying to find my unmute button. Thanks for that, guys. I see we have one question from Shadrock, so I'll just jump into that one. He says he'd love to hear details about how V3 geocodes reports when using the search function. Does that initial install connect to OpenStreetMap, Google, or anything else? How does that, yeah, how do we handle geolocation with V3?
So the like location editor on posts hits. I'm gonna forget the name of this. It's called Nonmap. I don't even know. It's the OpenStreetMap geolocator, which has an unpronounceable name that I forget every time. But so it hits the OpenStreetMap geocoder, and that's like primarily we use OpenStreetMap base layers as well. So it really makes sense to be hitting the OpenStreetMap geocoder so that we don't get like this mismatch of I'm on a Google Maps map and then I've used the OpenStreetMap geocoder and so my city point is off by a kilometer or something. It means you're getting it based on the same set of data as you're mapping over the top of. That does mean, you know, there are definitely some areas where OpenStreetMap lacks coverage, and so it does mean we miss a few things sometimes. It's definitely one of those things we'll probably have to look at in the future is like, do we actually need to give people an opportunity to switch that too?
Oh my god, the unmute button doesn't like me. Anyway, thanks for that, Robbie. We had another question from Dowdy who wanted to know, I know we talked about having unstructured posts coming in, you know, SMS and Twitter. Do we have those wired in yet? Or, you know, and if not, what does our timeline look like to have, you know, the ability to pull in SMS messages or Twitter messages into the platform?
Yeah, we do. So I'm just going to throw this back up again. So if you go in under settings and data sources on a deployment, you get this list of like possible places you can pull data from. So Twitter, this is all still, at the moment, it's still very much like you had in V2. You've got to go set up the APIs and things yourself. And so I probably shouldn't show my Twitter keys, but they're all just dev accounts anyway. But you know, so you configure a Twitter application or a Twilio account. So Twilio, Nexmo, SMS Sync, Frontline SMS are all possible SMS providers. And then you've got email if you want to be pulling in from a particular email account. So you set that all up, hit this button and configure it, but that won't actually work because I haven't configured the right things. But you know, enable and disable it. Then there's a background process that does the actual pull in on a regular, like 10-minute basis. And then those all land in as unstructured posts. So yeah, I think in short, that's all. Yes, that is all wired up. I'm sure we could still do better with some of it, but it's at about the same level of kind of just pulling stuff in like we did in V2, just the raw information.
Alrighty, thank you so very much. If there's anyone out there who has any question around, you know, what exactly V3 is or has a specific question around any feature, please do feel free to post them on our event page, or if you're online on Hipchat or IRC, just, you know, feel free to jump in and post your questions on there, and we'll field those to Robbie and Jess. You should, you know, capitalize on the time that we have with them in real time right now to have these questions answered while we're here. All right. I have another question. Well, it's not really a question, but more like more of an explanation into, you know, post types and the stages and how that applies. So, you know, our thinking around building in workflows into V3, I think it would be really good if you could explain that from the point of view like a real life deployment, like, you know, if it's elections, blah blah. Jess, Robbie, does any of you want to tackle that one?
I'll jump in a bit and I'll talk a little on terminology too, because I know we keep switching and changing. So one of the things first, right, is that you probably figured out by now is that we what we were previously calling reports, we're calling posts, which is partly just because the reflection of like being a wider, a wider use case of like a post could represent anything, not just a report of something that happened. Then you've got, so post types is, in V2 we just called them forms. They're a little bit bigger, broader in V3, so you have a post type is like, defines the set of steps and the set of fields that you fill in on a post. So the first thing you get, like if you hit add post, is okay, choose what type of post this is. That defines what the next step after that is. So what your forms and stuff look like. In terms of like real life use cases, steps could, I mean, they kind of be anything. But so like the obvious case to hark back to V2 is to do things like verification. So like you'll have your first step is just the post content. It's like the content of the report. What happened? Where did it happen? What date did it happen on? That might be your only fields. You know, you might add links to news or links to videos or media as well. And then your next step would be verification. So you might put that in another step. It may, depending on what your workflow is, you might say, you know, you have to fill out all the content fields. You know, that's a required step before you can publish this post. But you don't have to verify it before you can publish this post, right? So you can kind of chop and change that, or you could say that, you know, they have to do that and then they have to verify it. And so the verification could be, you know, you could do a V2 style verification where you just add one checkbox field, and all you have to do is check that box to publish the post. Or you could build out something more complicated, and I've seen people do this on V2, is like, okay, so I've verified the post, but I need to record, you know, how did we verify it? Who did you corroborate that information with? And so you might have a verification stage that is like the checkbox, yes, I verified it, but here's how I verified it and what the official sources are you can go to check that, and then you publish that. And then on the other side, on like a big deployment, you might build that out even more. So your first stage might be content, then you might have a step for geolocating, you might have a step for kind of verifying that information, and you can split that up. And so you could take out chunks of it and just only require, you know, people to fill in that first stage before they save a post, but then let all the other ones happen at later stages. And the way the big way of how you would build this out in a real deployment is that you would probably build save searches for almost every step, right? So you'd have a save search that shows everything that's in the verification step, which duplicates your, you know, awaiting verification queue. You'd have a save search of everything that's not published but has been verified, and so that's your like awaiting approval, just needs to be published queue. And then you build that out for whatever your use case is. Whatever steps you've got in your workflow, you could add those different queues, and if you've got a big team, you might have different people log in to look at each queue. Yeah. Someone else want to?
Yeah.
add?
Yeah, just a second kind of use case for this, which is a little different, is you know, if you're an organization or a company providing a good or service, and you want a way to interact with your customer base, a quick way of allowing them to engage with you and saying, hey, we need service. You know, my solar system needs servicing. They can simply text into the platform, or get on the web, whatever kind of medium they wish to use. And actually that post can have, once you structure that as needs service, there's several steps involved in that. And your team then knows exactly which step is assigned to them. They can quickly see which post they need to take care of, you know, verify that it needs service, call the customer and figure out where it needs service, actually go to the location of the product and service it, and then follow up with the customer. So, you know, that simple workflow is now built out. Everyone knows exactly what they're supposed to do, and it's action oriented. So you can actually see, you know, who's doing what and when the posts were completed, when the steps were completed.
All right, awesome. Thanks, guys.
I was just going to say there's some good examples of this on the demo site, which I think most of them are put together by Adam Bard when he was just playing testing around. So this is one that I'm sharing, which is like he has service ratings of local services, and so you just have, like name the service, type the description of it, add the location as a different step, rate the service as a step, does it work or does it not? And there's a bunch of these in terms of like, you have notice board posts that are just a simple like what's going on, where and when. You have all these different, different things, people needing shelter as a, request, then validate that request, then has the service been provided and has someone followed up. And in this case, and I think this is intentional, it's like there's not even any actual fields in some of these steps. They literally just exist as a checklist, right? Like they're just a checklist of has the step been done, has the next step been done, has the next step been done, which is actually one of the more interesting things. It doesn't necessarily even have to be about adding extra content. It can just be about checking off that step of the workflow.
All right. Thank you, guys. I'm seeing a steady stream of questions coming in, both via Hipchat, IRC, and the event page. So Adam, Cam, everybody else, I do have your questions lined up. I'm just going to circle back to the initial question on geolocation and just make a general comment for guys to know about, that you can actually use OpenStreetMap tools to help improve base maps for your own deployments. I think Shadrach has shared a couple of links on how to get started with that. So that's just as an FYI for you to remember. Jumping back onto post types, Adam wants to know if, as a deployer or an administrator, would he be able to open up the creation of post types to the end users while still keeping the admin created post types secure and non-editable? Does that make sense?
Read that out again. I just
He
lost
wants
that.
to know. Okay, let me try see if I can rephrase that into a shorter sentence. He wants to know if you can open up the possibility of end users creating their own post types while still being able to keep the ones that an admin has created secure and non-editable. Adam, did I catch your question correctly? Okay, I will assume that yes. But yeah, that's a question.
Right. So I'm just trying to get my head around this. So as in create new post types, but keep some keep some available just to an admin? Is that what we're saying? I'm not really.
No.
So
it's more like right now what we have is only an administrator can create custom post types, right?
Yeah.
So opening that up to the end user while still keeping the admin created post types secure and non-editable.
Right.
Yes.
No, that's not so you can't do that, and I'm not sure that we necessarily want to, at least not initially. So I guess once you have custom roles, you could in theory open that up to everyone, but that would open up access to edit post types as well. The kind of thought process, at least my thought process behind post types, is that a post type is how you define what data you're collecting for your deployment. And so to kind of keep any structure to your deployment, you really still need to you need to have one or a few people defining those post types. If you end up with a kind of proliferation of 100 post types because everyone added their own, that's sort of a problem. It's not the post types cease to be useful if you've got 100 of them, because you can no longer filter by similar fields across post types. Everyone will kind of define their own way of collecting that data, and so that you need to have similar post types to structure that data so that you can query across it, so that you can actually get insight out of it. I do know, I think it was Adam I talked to about this early on, is that I think that part of what they were going for was this idea of kind of almost a wiki style deployment where, so basically empowering your community and so giving them the ability to create their own post types when they need them, when something isn't fulfilled. I don't have a great answer for how you do that right now. Maybe with some kind of middle tier role where someone can kind of earn their place in that community a bit more. and then you can give limited access to some of them to do it. I actually think if you gave everyone access to that, it might just confuse them as well, in terms of like, am I adding a post? Am I adding a post type? It's one thing to expect admins to get their head around how that works, and quite another to expect every single user that arrives to get their head around it. So I guess the short answer is like, no, I don't have a good solution for that right now. I'm really interested to see what we can come up with, but it's a way down priorities, I think, of other things that need to happen first.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other way is around that is, even though no, we aren't necessarily opening up post types to contributors to make their own post types, but you can definitely configure a post type to be, if they have data that doesn't fit with the post types that you've already created, just in other, right? That's just a free text form. That's absolutely possible. And then you can manually go in and kind of look at those posts and see if you need to create a new post type, if there's trends in those kind of responses.
Okay, awesome. So with post types, no. How about with categories? Or rather, what we're calling tags now. Having users coming in and adding in their own custom tags.
Yeah, well, you can't do that. That one would be easier to open up, I think, and keep sane. It's not something that we actually have a permission for separately at the moment. So it is, again, still only managed by an admin. But I think there's probably some possibility of making that something that people could add to a bit more. I remember V2 had like a kind of inline. As you were creating posts, you could inline and just add more categories. And I think something like that would make a lot of sense for some deployments.
Okay.
I'll add to my list of notes.
All right. So I know we're running out of time, but we have 4 more questions. So I think what I'll do is I'll probably extend our time just by like 5 to 10 minutes, if that's okay with you guys, so that we can at least answer these questions, and then make sure we cover that during our next Hangout next week. We had another question that came in from a guy called Amnesic on IRC. He wants to know whether we have a timeline on how soon people will be able to add media onto post types. That's photos, that's videos. How soon do we see that being added into the platform?
I'm not actually sure where that falls in the schedule. It shouldn't be far off, but I think our push at the moment is to get the Ushahidi platform, like the hosted version of it, up and running. And once we kind of got there, our focus will shift back a bit more to features and things. And so uploading photos is actually a little bit of an odd one, where like literally half of that is built in the API, and it just needs to be tied up into the other end. So it's not far off, right? Like it's mostly there. We use a lot of the tech for it to upload your background images to deployment. We just got to get over the line first with some other things. So I'd say a few months, but probably by the end of the year.
Yeah, we've got it scheduled in the first release after post-launch. So the 3.0.1.
Okay, thank you guys. And then we have another question from Cam. So he had 2 questions, so I think I'll combine those 2 together. He finds the new V3 layout has a lot of white space. How configurable is the layout? And then 2, is there a way to load an alternative CSS onto your deployment? So adding in your own custom design.
So at the moment, there's not a lot of easy ways to jump into that configuration. So you can't tweak layout from a setting or anything like that. What you can do is swap out the theme or the CSS, but it is a little bit involved. So one of the things we did when building this is we built out the CSS as kind of a different repository called the pattern library, and so that's actually quite really well documented process of building the CSS and stuff in there. And so what you can do is grab the grab that pattern library repository, create a fork of it, customize it to the look and feel you kind of need, and then take the client and do a rebuild of the client with a different CSS on it, which is a little bit of an involved process. It involves like tweaking, swapping the dependency out in npm, and doing a rebuild with Gulp, which is a bit involved. Unfortunately, it's not as easy as just like swap the CSS files right now. It totally should be at some point. And one of the sort of things we've thought about building is, if you've worked with WordPress, WordPress has like a built-in CSS editor where you can, I don't think you can necessarily edit what you've already got, but you can at least add some CSS to it just in a text field in the admin. And we've definitely thought about trying to, figuring out how we do something like that.
Cam wants to know what the name of the NPM is.
So there's, I'll drop links in the chat for that one.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah.
Okay. Just 2 more questions, and then I think we'll just wrap that up and keep the conversation going on chat. Sebastian would like to know, how will the platform accept data from sensors? We talked about having the ability to pull in sensor data before. So what are we thinking around that? Visibility?
So at the moment there's nothing that's like sensor specific, but because it's all built on top of an API, you could quite easily do that anyway. So it's a matter of just putting something in between your sensor and the API and just having it quickly reformat data from a sensor and push it into the platform. And there's a bunch of kind of intermediary services that will deal with the scale of that as well. So one of the kind of considerations if you're dealing with sensor data is that you're getting a reading every second or something for days at a time, and that's a huge amount of data. And what you actually want to deal with may be a significantly less of that data than the whole set. And there's a bunch of intermediary services, which I cannot remember the name of, that will manage that data, so that then you can just be pushing on samples of it through to Ushahidi, or pushing reports into Ushahidi when it goes over a quota or over over some level. Or you could just push all of it in and then deal with that within the platform too. But it's really a matter of, at the moment, you'd have to build a little bit of API glue, right? You'd have to have something that receives from whatever your sensor sends and turns it into the format that the Ushahidi API wants.
Alrighty. Thank you, Robbie. One final question, and that one's coming from me. I'm sure the question that's on a lot of people's mind is, I'm currently on a V2 deployment. How do I get to V3 without having to start from scratch? Which is basically, what's our migration plan? And for the same thing applies not just to the self-hosted deployments, but for the guys on CrowdMap Classic. What are we thinking around that, and what timeline kind of are we working with?
Just looking at Jess, wondering if she wants to jump in on timeline. I could answer it, but I don't want to answer it wrong.
No, absolutely. So in terms of migration, on the Ushahidi code base, if you're hosting your own, there we are building a plugin that essentially you can, it's a tool that you can implement, export the data from your V2 deployment, and that V3 will automatically grab that data and put it into the V3. And so on the Ushahidi platform that will be hosted, that's all going to be automated, and so it'll be kind of a very simple user interface with a flow to, yes, upgrade my deployment from CrowdMap Classic, and upgrade me to Ushahidi. Timelines on that are by the end of the year, so definitely before 2016.
Okie doke. Thanks, guys. I'm sure that's a question that was running on a lot of people's minds. So it's just always good to know that we have you guys in mind. That we are going to make sure that you're sorted in terms of being able to migrate your data over to the new version of the platform. All right. Is there anyone who has? I have space for one more question. If anyone has any, and here I am scanning the chat. If there's anyone who has anything. Aha. Considering migration, this is from Adam. He wants to know, can newly created maps in V3 have the same names as V2 or crowd map deployments? Does that make sense?
Depends on the context, I guess. If we're talking about creating, so if we're talking about creating a map on like the hosted ushahidi.com, and having the same subdomain or same name as what you had for your old crowd map deployment, one of the things we're accounting for as we build this is reserving all those old names, so that if you had if you had robbiesmap.crowdmap.com, someone else can't come along and register that on ushahidi.com. And so whatever so that at the point where you come to upgrade, you can upgrade and use that same subdomain that you had before, and keep your same URLs and things. So that's one of the things we're definitely thinking about. So you won't be able to come along and grab the URL that someone else had, either accidentally or intentionally. I think I'm assuming that was what you were asking.
Yes. I'm hoping that that's what he was asking, but I feel like you've covered the answer pretty well.
I see Cam also asked about sharing
post types.
Post types. So yes. I don't have a solution for that yet, but you make a really good point. It's like sharing, building out post types and sharing them between deployments is kind of an obvious thing to do. The designs actually have a screen in for having templated post types when you go to set up post types, which is something that we haven't built because of time, but we should be building, so that when you first go to create those post types in your deployment, you're getting like templates for a basic post, or templates for a kind of standard verification workflow, or templates for a missing person, or whatever you might want, and hitting some common use cases. And I feel like along with that, maybe an extension to doing, once we've got those templates in, it would be being able to share those templates, being able to export a post type or something. It's definitely not in the near term, but I can imagine that being something people would want. I can imagine it being something that just even clients or custom deployments might want, where they want to be able to spin up 100 deployments, but they all start with those same post types.
Okie dokes. Awesome. I think I'm going to end the question asking phase now, because we've kind of run over time. But I think just keep the questions coming. Keep posting them on Hipchat, IRC, or Gitter. Share your feedback with us on our platform issues page on GitHub. I'll definitely post those links online for you to have a look at. For those of you who aren't able to make the Hangout, or if you know anybody who was interested and wasn't able to join in, we're going to be able to provide a link. This has been recorded, so it'll be available for you to kind of go through afterwards. All right. I think we're also planning on having another Hangout next week, which will be a deeper dive into how to use V3. It would be good if you could think about specific examples of, like an example of a type of deployment that you'd like to work on. We're already brainstorming within the team on what kind of deployment this would be, so that we're applying the training itself to a real-life example of what we would be able to use V3 on. And if you have any ideas, feel free to post them on our chat pages and all of that. All right, Michelle's telling me to talk about mobile. Yes. Robbie? Just a general comment on how exactly have we tackled the mobile side of things?
So there's a couple of bits to this. The main one is that it's all the layout in CSS is responsive. So what you get on a desktop just works on a mobile phone too. Let me see if I can pull up something useful. Not sure if this will work if I share screen, but I'll try it anyway. So whatever you can kind of get on a desktop, you should be able to get to on mobile, and you don't have to change platforms. You don't have to swap around. Let's just see if I can make this window smaller. So as this kind of cuts down in size, you just get a smaller version of everything, and you can still get into all these menus. You can still get into the entire admin as a pop-out through here. And so on a phone, this actually works pretty well. I think the limiting bit at the moment is probably that we need to do a little bit of a performance sprint to make sure this is really good on even if you're on kind of a low budget phone and you don't happen to have like the latest iPhone. And then the other side of this is that there's an Android app which is kind of underway. It's not done yet, but Henry is hard at work spinning out a new version of the Android app that hits the V3 APIs rather than V2 APIs, and again kind of does everything that you can do in the front end. Yeah, and so you kind of get the same stuff we had for V2 and more stuff, right? Like one of the good bits about doing the responsive thing is that if you customize your own deployment and if you add plugins or whatever else at some point that add extra bits, those will continue to just work on mobile. Whereas previously, you added a plugin to your V2 deployment and then you went to the Android app, and because it was just the Android app coded as it was, you didn't get any of those extra features, right? So mobile lost all the extra features. Whereas this way, anything you customize on your deployment, you can pretty easily have that work on mobile too.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. I really am going to end this now. I won't ask you any more questions. So just a little preview into what's coming up next. One, we're definitely going to be giving you guys a bit of a walkthrough on how to install Ushahidi version 3, because I know that a couple of you have been trying and you've been having a few problems. We'll be sharing that a little later. Next Thursday, we're going to be having a deeper dive into how exactly to use Ushahidi version 3 using a very specific example. If you have ideas on that, please send that through. How can you get involved? Please download, go play around with it, break it, share your feedback with us. We're going to share the links with you. Help us make the platform available in your local language. We've been seeing a lot of guys jumping in and help us translate the software. We have Indonesian at 100%, Swahili at 90%. Let's try and see a lot other languages kind of coming up to that level. You want to jump into the code, just pick a feature on our workboard or on our feature list and try jump in and fix that. Jump in on all our conversations on Hipchat, on our mailing list, and we'd be happy to do that. And more importantly, if you want to play around or test the hosted version that's coming out soon, please go sign up on our waiting list on ushahidi.com. Make sure you do that right after this. Thank you guys so much for joining us. That was amazing. Thank you for all the awesome questions. Keep them coming. Keep playing around with it. And see you guys next week. Bye, guys.